Well, hello and welcome to today's webcast to build your first construction inspection application. My name is Dave McCormick, and I am the VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software. And today I'm going to be going through the sample application that was built just about a year ago for inspecting basically construction equipment. But today's webinar could also be called a beginner's guide to putting together an offline data collection application for a phone or for a tablet. The example just happens to be for construction equipment, which is actually something we see quite a bit of here at Alpha. People come to us all the time looking for this type of application, and one similar to it as well for manufacturing. So don't think of it just for construction, think of it as for your own purpose as well. And in fact, today we're going to be showing you how to modify the app so that you can use it for your own use. So to begin, we're going to be showing off this application mostly in the simulation mode. And the simulation mode means that we can't use a couple of the features such as the GPS and the scanner, but what we will be able to use is the simulator for showing you the other parts of the screens. But to begin, I would like to show off those parts that I won't be able to show off in the simulator. So I'm going to ask you to do something, and that is, I want you to quickly take a look at this little short video I produced.
Hi, I'd like to show you a sample application for Alpha Anywhere called Inspection Solutions. The application is designed to collect data from field workers who are inspecting construction equipment like front-end loaders and dump trucks. Let me show you how it works. When the app opens, there is a blank screen with two tabs at the top, which are Past Inspections and New Inspections. We'll click the New Inspections tab to start collecting data, and we'll begin the process by scanning the equipment we want to inspect. Now, this sample comes with 6 different choices, which you see here on the equipment sheet, and this sheet is included with the application. But of course, you could replace this sample equipment with a list of any data you like. Now, when you click the Scan button, the device's camera is activated, and it looks for a barcode or a QR code. The QR code contains the equipment's identification number, and the app then uses that number to look up the name, make, model, and year of the equipment from its built-in data cache. It also displays a picture of the equipment at the top. The next thing we'll do is enter the location of the equipment by tapping on the Locate button. In this window, we enter the name of the location and let the app fill in the latitude and longitude using the GPS sensor built into the device. Now it's time to start inspecting. Some items can simply be marked pass or fail, like whether the glass and windows are in good condition. And here we use large buttons that are easy to tap. The questions themselves are divided into different panels. The first panel has questions about the cabin of the vehicle, and you can move from panel to panel by swiping left or right. On the next panel, we have a couple of other types of controls. There's the number control that lets you rate the conditions of the paint and decals. And there's also this note control that lets the inspector type in notes or dictate them using the device's built-in speech-to-text capabilities. When you fill in some text, the note changes from gray to yellow to indicate that your text has been saved. By clicking the camera icon, you can take and annotate a picture. There's a magnifying box up at the top that lets you choose where you want to annotate, and you have choices of different colored pens and a highlighter. There's also an eraser if you make a mistake. Once you choose a pen, you just draw right on the picture. You could use a stylus if you want, but it's really not necessary. On the next page, there's a meter indicator, which changes depending on the PSI value you enter. Between 1000 and 2000 psi, the meter points to the middle. Above or below that point, it points right or left. On the last page, there's a signature capture control, so the inspector can sign off on the report and submit it. Once it's submitted, the report appears on the Past Inspections tab with a blue triangle at the top right, indicating that the record is ready to be synchronized with a back-end database. And from there, you can add your own connector to the database or web server of your choice. The application was designed for a small tablet device. In this case, we're using an 8-inch Android tablet from Acer, but it could easily be modified to fit on a phone as well. If you think you could find this useful, Then download the app and give it a try. It uses out-of-the-box Alpha Anywhere functionality with a minimum of hand-coded JavaScript so that it can be easily modified without breaking it. Thanks for watching.
All right, and we are back. Hopefully that played for you, and you were able to take a look at what this Inspection Solutions application does. And in this session today, I'm going to be going through how it was put together, how to modify it, how to tweak it, how to make it your own. So let's take a quick look at the parts of the application. We'll take a look here at the Inspection Solutions screen. And starting up here, we'll notice in the video, actually, it looked a little bit more like this. Let me show you the video version of it. We had, these are two tabs here. There's the past inspection screen and the new inspection screen. And for each of the past inspections, there was a date, there was a picture or a icon of the type of equipment that was inspected, and there was a collection of information about that equipment. Basically, its make, its model, and the year it was made. And there was a little icon up here, this little triangle, that lets you know whether or not you have synchronized this data to a back-end server, which we haven't yet done in this point. Looking at this back in the simulator, you'll see it says no records in list, and that is because what we have created here is a list control. And if you don't know what a list control is, that's quite all right. We're going to get to that in a moment, but I'm going to show you a couple other features of this. Up at the top, we have our own custom icon, which is just basically a graphic. Below are two buttons that I've laid out to look like tabs. The first one is for past inspections. It's the one that's lit up. It would show you all of the inspections of equipment that we have done in the past. And the other is a button or a tab that we could click called New Inspections. And if we clicked on New Inspections, it would take you to a page that looked like this, where you have a button to scan the equipment and a button to take a GPS location coordinate capture and some pass-fail buttons and so on. So let's start up at the very beginning, though, on this page, and I kind of want to show you how that was put together. So I'm going to jump right over into Alpha Anywhere, and we are looking at a UX component. Let me go back to the Web Projects control panel. We are looking at a UX component called Inspection Solutions. Now, just to let you know, a copy of this application is available for you to download, and at the end of the presentation, I'm going to show you how to get your own copy. But when you open up the copy that you get from download, you're going to see Inspection Solutions as the UX control. So I'm going to go back here into Inspection Solutions, and I have divided it up. Up here we have the Past Inspections button, we have the New Inspections button, and we have our built-in header image. So let's say you wanted to use this application for yourself, but you didn't want to call it Inspection Solutions. Probably the first thing you would do is change the header, and you would do that right here by clicking on the built-in header item here and clicking on image name. Now, when you first open this component, you might not see all this stuff expanded out like that. It may look something like this, all wrapped up. All you need to do is just double-click on these arrows here, and they will open up for you. So here's the built-in header image. I'm going to go right over here to image name. I'm going to click on image name, and you'll see that that was the graphic that I selected. I could choose any other graphic that I want to. And if I wanted to add a new one, so these are styles from my web project folder, I would go back here first to the Web Projects control panel, go down to Images. I would click Add File, and I just look on my hard drive and find the image that I wanted, and it would appear here in the Images folder. So let's go back to our UX component. So that's how you could trade out the image that you want for the header, and that'll appear on every single page. Now we've had these two tab buttons. I call them Past Inspections and New Inspections, but you could actually call them anything you like. Here I've called it Past Inspections, but if I wanted to call it, say, Old Inspections, I could simply click here on the button text and change that button text so that it says Old. Click OK. We're going to go to Working Preview and take a look at the change. This usually renders a little bit quicker, but when I'm running GoToWebinar and recording all at the same time, sometimes it takes a little bit longer. So now you see it says old inspections. You'll also notice here in these tabs I have these little icons next to them. Let me show you how I put those in. So where I have my button, my old inspection and my new inspection, if you take a look at the style, the button appearance, the button layout is called image followed by text. I actually have some other options here too. I could have just done a text-only button or put the image above or below, but I did image followed by text, and then all I had to do was choose my image. And that was the image that I chose. Again, it was an image that was already in the web project style. Okay, moving on. When I click on each one of these buttons, you will notice something, that they will not just move to a different page, but they change in color and appearance. And I did that using a cascading style sheet setting, which I want to show you. So here I am in old inspections. If I click new inspections, notice right now this is gray text, gray background. I click on it, it becomes white text on a blue background, and it moves to another page. Let me show you how I did that. Basically I can move back and forth like this, changing this style each time. So back here in the design mode, I have a class for that button that I called header on. Let's take a look at that class. Header on is blue background, white text. That's how I defined it. I could edit it right in here if I wanted to, if I wanted to use a different color scheme. There's the header on scheme. All I have to do is just edit the local CSS, scroll down to header on, which is a little further down here. I think it might be at the very bottom. Here it is. Yep. And here I've indicated the background color. You can use a paint program, or you could use Google to find a color that you like. I've indicated the text color. I've indicated the type of font, which we used Arial, and the font size, which is 22 pixels, and I've made it bold. So that's what it looks like when the button is lit up. Now, for new inspection, which is turned off by default because we go to the old or past inspections first, we use a different class called header off, and header off is gray background, gray text, like I showed you before. So when you click on these, two things happen, and I'm going to show you what they do. The first is that it's going to move to another panel. I'm going to tell you about panels here in a moment, and that panel is going to show you a whole set of controls, either the, and in this case it's the controls in which you do the inspection. It's also going to do this little tiny piece of inline JavaScript. Let me just show you how that works. I'm going to double click on that. And all it says in this piece of JavaScript, and this is here in the component, you can change it as you want, is that when I've clicked on it, I want you to switch the component name called past to header on, and I want you to switch the other component to header off. And these are the names of the two buttons. We'll see. Let me move up and show that to you. Button's name is past, and the other button's name was new. So I just wrote a tiny bit of JavaScript to change the colors like that. Below each of those buttons, just to make it look like a tab and not just two buttons that were placed next to each other, all I did was I took a piece of HTML. Let me show that to you. And it's just the same color as the active color. So this is just this big stripy line right here is this piece of text right there. And the definition for it is right up here. Here's the style. Again, we're using that same background color, which is hashtag 65C1FA. All right, so far so good. That's how the buttons work. Inside, now below, we have that list, which is the inspections list. And the inspections list is a list control. Now, list control is kind of cool. It's a data control that can store data both online and offline. It can synchronize with a back-end data source, and it can be used to display data as well as edit data. Let me show you how that's defined. I'm going to double-click on that. Here are all of the fields in this list. So they include the QR code for the piece of equipment that I'm inspecting, the picture of the equipment, the name of the equipment, the inspection date, and then some various other inspection type fields, including cabin glass, cabin seat, cabin door. All has to do. This is very specific to our particular applications, but you can absolutely go in here and change the fields to the fields that you like. So let's talk about changing fields. Let's go back into data source. And in data source, I've selected, in this case, a static data source. I'm going to click on it and just show you all it is just a whole list of field names, just all along here. What you probably would do is either use a web service backend or a SQL backend and define it that way. We do it here as a static data source so that it's portable and so you can pull it apart yourself. Now, the detail view, let me go back and show you what that actually looks like here, is this piece here. Take a look. There's a date. There's that picture of the truck. There's the make, model, that's the inspection date. There's the make, model, and manufacturer date here on the right. And if I go back into Alpha, we take a look at the list layout. We've actually created that using HTML. So I built just a little table here. There's the inspection date, which is a field. I pulled it out of here, the list, so that was on the left. There's the picture of the equipment, which is here, equipment picture, and there is the make, the model, and the year as it's displayed in that list. So the nice thing about a list is once all that data is in place, it really handles synchronization for you. It handles the case of what happens when your device loses connectivity, so it can keep data safely offline. It can save state, meaning if you shut off the application suddenly, you get a phone call, you jump out of the application, that data will still be preserved. So that's all there in the list builder. And that really covers the first page of the Inspection Solutions application. So let's move on to the next page. And let me show you a picture of that next page, which is this one here. This is the one with the scan and the locate buttons. And hopefully if you saw the video at the very beginning, you saw these in action where we're actually scanning QR codes and using the real GPS to make that work. So let's see how we wired that up. So jumping back into Alpha Anywhere, we'll take a look at the scan button. Go grab that. And it is, 1 second, right here, QR code scan. So again, I've used a button, an image for this, where it said image followed by text, and I've used a barcode scanner picture that I got from an icon set to make it look nice on the screen. But if I double click on it, I can show you what's going on behind the scenes. Again, just a little tiny bit of JavaScript. Let me click on that. And basically, you can copy all this out of here. And what it does is it basically takes a look at the QR code, and then looks at something called the client-side data cache to look up what that QR code applies to. So we have a QR code for the steamroller, for example. We have a different QR code for the bulldozer, and we have a different barcode for the front-end loader. And each of those are stored in a back-end data source. In a client-side data cache, I'm going to show you that in a second, and that gets filled into the fields here. You can absolutely just steal the code that I've done here. I also have it insert the inspection date and a few other pieces of information. And it also lets you know whether or not the QR code scan was successful. For example, if the scanner had an issue where it couldn't read the code, it'll give you back an error and tell you what the error is. Or if the scanner couldn't find that piece of equipment in the client-side data cache, it would let you know that as well. So you're probably asking, if you're new, what the heck is the client-side data cache? And let's go take a look at that right now. Now, unlike the list control, which holds data that you can edit and view, the client-side data cache is just a repository that you store fixed information in. So, for example, we already knew information about all of these pieces of equipment in inventory. So when I go in here to the client-side data cache editor, you'll see I have a data cache item called equipment. And if I look into that, let's edit that item. It can also be based on SQL query. In other words, if you have SQL Server or MySQL or MariaDB or something, and you want to look up the information to fill your client-side data cache, you can use that. Here again, I've used static data. Let's take a look at that static data. And you'll see the static data is just a collection of records in JSON format. So the first field, equipment ID, is the name, is the ID. It's followed by the name. It's followed by the picture, followed by the make, the model, and the year. So I'm going to go back to PowerPoint here for a second. When we're taking a look at this, all of these pieces of information, the make, the model, the year, the picture, they all came out of the client-side data cache, which is something that we had pre-populated. So let's pop back into Alpha here. So that's the scan button. The scan button pulls the data from the client-side data cache and it populates these fields. And these fields, in turn, are collected in the list control, in the inspections list, which I showed you earlier. The other button, hopping back here to PowerPoint, is the locate button. And the locate button does a couple of things. It opens up a window and it lets you take a GPS scan using the GPS unit in the phone or tablet that you're using, but it also lets you type in the name of the location that you're in. So let me show you how I put that together. So back over here, here's the locate button. I'm just going to double click on it. And all this does is it opens up a location window. So I did this using what we call Action JavaScript. So Action JavaScript, unlike the other type of JavaScript that I've been showing you, is all sort of wizard-driven. So if I click on that, basically the action that I've added, which is this one here, I'm going to say edit action, is just basically telling it I want to open up a window, and the window I want to open up is called Get Location. Now there's a lot of, if I were to add some actions here, if you're not familiar with this is really cool. There are a whole bunch of other actions I could get it to do. I could get it to play a video, I could get it to open a map, I could get it to upload or download a file. I mean, there's tons and tons and tons of stuff in here, way more than I could even scratch the surface during today's presentation. But the one I did today was the one that was just called Show Container Window. So let me take a look at the container windows. We have them all at the very bottom of my design. And here's my Get Location window. And location window is just basically a different layout in which you can place different fields. So in this location window, I have a location name, location latitude, GPS coordinates, and a save. I might be able to open this in working preview. I'm not positive. Let's just take a quick look, because if we can, it would be kind of instructive. And if we can't, not a big deal. Just open this up in preview. And we're going to do new inspection, and we're going to choose locate. Yeah, it does open. Great. So this is the window. And notice up at the top it says enter inspection location. This is where I type in the name of the location. And if I wasn't running this in a simulator, but I was running this in a real device, if I clicked on that GPS button, it would actually save the latitude and would get the latitude, longitude, fill it into these fields, and then save it. So let me just go ahead and hit save. And let me show you how that was built. So here we have the window called Get Location. I think I can just double click on that to show you the properties. Nope, it closes it. Sorry about that. Window properties. Up at the top, I have it say Enter Inspection Location. And notice I've used HTML tags. That's completely allowed here. So I decided to put in a bold tag just to make it look a little better. I could have also specified the fonts, the color, and a whole bunch, and basically anything you can do in HTML, I can do there. So here we've laid out the fields for location name, location latitude, location longitude, and then that button. And let me show you how that button worked for getting the GPS location. Let me double click on that. And this is also an Action JavaScript action, so that there is no reason for you to write this yourself. You just basically tell it what fields you want to put the location data in when you call that action. And I could just open that up and say I want to fill the latitude into a field that I called location lat, and longitude into a field that I called longtation long. Now, if you take a look, it actually has some other settings which I think are pretty cool. It can tell you if the device supports it, mind you, it can tell you the altitude. It can tell you the speed at which you're going. It can tell you the direction. In other words, the heading. They're headed north, going, at this velocity, at this altitude. That might be useful for your application. Most of the time, you just need to grab a latitude and longitude, which is what we've done here. So then that got filled into the device. And then the last thing we had, which was the Save button. And the Save button, all it really does is just closes the window, and it sets the variables that we've collected from the latitude and longitude back into our list control. So that was it. So I've been jumping around here between windows and what we call panels. So now would be a good time to actually talk about panels and how we put applications together. If we take a look at this here, we have this header which appears on every single page, but then we have this which only appears, this section here only appears on the New Inspections tab. And then down here we have questions that I can actually swipe through. Let me show that to you live because it makes more sense. And basically we've divided up our apps into these little components which we call panel cards. Give it a moment. We'll go over to New Inspection. So now here are the questions for the cabin. Now I'm just going to scroll my mouse over here. You'd swipe this with your finger when you're using it in real life. And you'll see this all stayed in place, but this section down here has changed from cabin to exterior, from exterior to engine hydraulics, and then finally to the sign and file. And now we are back here at cabin. So if we take a look at that, when you're building applications in Alpha Anywhere, you basically break up the functionality into areas when you're building out your user interface, and those areas are often put into what are called panel cards. So let me show you a simple example of diagram in which we have 3 panel cards, panel card 1, 2, and 3. And all we're doing is we're just swiping from one card to the next card to the next card. Now we're able to swipe from card to card because we have placed these 3 different cards into what we call a panel navigator. Panel navigator lets you navigate from card to card. Now there's another type of container that can hold panel cards, and that is called a panel layout. Let me show that to you. And this is called a panel layout. And in this case, here we have card 1 and card 2, and they're both being displayed at exactly the same time. So you don't swipe from one to the other. Now, if you put those concepts together, which is what we did in our application, you could end up with something like this, where you have a panel layout, where here's panel card 1, and here's panel layout, or panel card 2, or panel layout 2, I should call it. And within that, you have a couple of panel cards, 2 and 3, but that panel card is actually contained in a navigator. And this one's contained in a navigator too, so you can really come up with any possible combination that you want. For example, I'd like to have an interface that slides up and then an interface that slides right, but I always want to have these areas displayed. So you'll do that using a combination of panel layouts and panel navigators. Again, the difference between the two, a navigator lets you navigate or move from panel card to panel card, whereas the panel layout is fixed, so it just stays in one place. I hope that I clarified that a little bit. So as we're going through these different functions, and I've shown you this stuff here, we're going to be taking a look at different panel cards because that's where I've placed each of the fields. So going back into Alpha Anywhere, just hop over there for a minute. Here are our questions, our pass-fail questions. You can just click them. And this is all done using CSS. I'm going to show you how to change the colors and the labels in just a moment. You'll notice all of these are contained here in this cabin panel. So let's go into design mode and find where that is. So here it is, panel, just scroll down here. Here's our panel navigator, which lets us move from panel to panel. And here's our panel card 3. Panel card 3 is the one that contains the information about the cabin. So I've laid out this panel card to include some text at the top, which is basically just says cabins, you know what section you're on, as well as this swipe image, and you'll recognize that. Let me just click on that so I can show you what I mean. Click. So that's this image here that you saw. And then there's a container that I've placed them both in, and I've given that a gray background. So in working preview, let me show you what that looks like. So here, oh, come on. Here is the container with the gray background. Here's my word cabin, and here's that picture I just showed you. And that hangs out at the very top of my panel card. It serves as the header. Now we get into the questions. So for each one of the questions, I've built some containers. First is a container to hold all of the questions called the cabin questions container. And a container is just a way of grouping things. They don't actually appear, you don't see lines around it, although you can style them so that they do appear, but they're often just a good way of keeping things clear as you design. So the first question is the cab 1 question, and it basically had this label which said glass and windows, and it had a hidden field where you could store whether or not the glass and windows was a pass or fail. And these are the buttons, the pass-fail buttons, that go for that particular question. Let me show you how that was wired up. First of all, I'm using button classes again. So let me show you the classes that I used for these pass-fail buttons. There's fail off, which shows you that the button is off. There's a button there, but it's off. There's fail on, which indicated you press the button and now that button is activated. We have pass off, which I've done in green, and we have pass on, again now with dark green and a white background. And when you click on the fail button, it sets the states of both the fail and the pass buttons so that one lights up one way and one lights up the other way. It also, and more importantly, actually collects the choice that you made when you clicked on it. So all it does is it sets the value, in this case cab glass, that's the name of our field, to fail. And that's what happens when you click on the fail button for cab glass. Not surprisingly, if you clicked on the pass button and you took a look at the value it set, it would set cab glass to pass. So that's how you do it. If you wanted to rename the question, you could just easily do that right here in the static text. You could also rename the field if you wanted to as well, the cab glass field, but you'd need to make sure that you change it here in these buttons as well. So now that you know the one for cabin glass and how that was put together, you'll understand how actually most of the controls in this application were put together. Let me go back into working preview and show you what I mean. So back here in new inspection, we've got fail, pass, pass, fail, pass, fail. Here's the instrument panel. Click, 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 click. Great. So we're going to move over here. And on this page, we have some different types of controls. I've got a button control, and I also have this camera control where I can take a picture and annotate that picture. Click Save. And I also have another one which has got notes. Let me show you how those are put together. So we're going to move down to that section. Let me close up this container because it's kind of getting in my way. Cabin questions container. It's going to shrink that down. And we're going to go to the exterior container here. And here we go. Here are our button lists. So where we had button 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, these are just simply buttons. And I've used that same sort of technique that I used with pass and fail. I've given these a class. By default, the class is off. So if I said number off, you'll see it's just it's in gray. And if I said number on, it's in blue. And if I wanted to edit those colors, let's say I wanted to make it green or something like that, not blue, I just edit the local CSS for number on, scroll down to where it says number on, right here, and I would change the color here. Here's that color we had before, there's the blue, but I could change it to green or any other color that I wanted to. Okay, moving down here. So those are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons. Similar to pass-fail, when I click on them, it turns all the other buttons to the sets all of the style of the other buttons to off. It sets the style to the button that you clicked on to on. In other words, it just changes the CSS so that it appears blue instead of gray. And then does the most important thing, and that is actually set the data value. And again, here we set the one called ext decal to 1. Now that's what happens when we click the 1 button. When we click the 2 button, not surprisingly, we set it to 2. When we click the 3 button, we set it to 3, and so on. And below that, we've placed these little bits of text to let you know what 1 means and what 5 is supposed to mean. All right. So let's see. The rest of these are pass-fail buttons. You're familiar with those already. This is just a container for filling. This is also pass-fail, sorry. And this one here has got an image. Let's take a look at that. And that image is, I believe that's the note one. Let's take a look at it, though. Yeah, here it is, notes. And the next one was the camera. Notes and camera. Let's go to PowerPoint so we don't have to wait for it to reload, and I'll show you what that is. So that's the notes picture, and that's the camera picture. Now when I click on the notes picture, what I want to have happen is I want to have a window appear in which I can type in notes. So let me show you how we did that. Pop over here, and we'll scroll down, and basically what I did was I set an on-click event. So this is the notes one. The on-click event, it uses Action JavaScript, and what it does is it opens a window called ext_q4. For the camera one, it opens a window, let me double-click it, called, double-click, oops, sorry. It shows a container window called ext_q4 pick window, because that's the one that the picture is in. So for the notes one, let's go down to our windows, which I keep at the very end here. And there is the notes window, Q4 X note window. And we've expanded it. And it just has a notes field in it. It's a multi-line. It's called a text area control, so it's more than just one line. And it basically has a save button next to it. So if I'm in working preview, all right, wait for this to load. And I'm doing a new inspection, and I'm on the next page, and I click Notes. There's that window. Notes about deck, step, rails. This is where I type in the information, and this is where I save it. All the controls I just showed you a moment ago here in this window. So up here it says Notes. The window itself is where you type in what you're looking for. So if you wanted to modify that, let me just show you where that is. If you look in Window Properties, I said Notes about the deck, the steps, and the rails. Obviously, for your own application, you'll probably be asking different questions. You might want to change this text to the question that you are asking. Okay, so moving on down, we also had one for picture. And let me show you the picture one. ext_q4 pick window. Okay, so the picture window has got a couple of controls, one of which you have not seen before, called the ink control. And the ink control is a special type of control that lets you both display pictures, but more importantly, you can write on top of the pictures. And I'm going to give you some documentation at the end for how to configure this control. Basically, if you look at ink properties, there's some information, some properties here for setting its size. You can set the default color of the ink. You can set how you want it to zoom. There's actually quite a few properties here. In fact, the ink control could be its own little mini webinar, although out of the box, the default behavior works pretty well as well. We also have a button that takes a picture and saves a picture. The Taking the Picture button, if I double-click on it, uses another piece of Action JavaScript. That's the kind of JavaScript you don't have to write yourself, you use a wizard for. And all it did was I told it I wanted to use the image capture JavaScript. And there are two methods in which you can capture an image. You can use HTML5, or you can use Phonegap, or you could use Phonegap Preferred, which means use Phonegap Preferred when Phonegap is available. So at this point, you're probably saying, okay, what the heck is Phonegap? Well, Phonegap is a neat little shell application. What it is it lets you build essentially a native application for your phone or for your tablet that you install like a regular application, but inside it, it runs an HTML browser. And so when you build an Alpha Anywhere application, you can either build it as a pure HTML5 application, in which case you just tell people the URL and they'd open it up on their phone or their browser, or they can open it up, or you could wrap it up in what's called Phonegap, and they can install it as an application. Now, there's some big advantages to installing it as an application as opposed to using it just purely as an HTML5 application. And those are specifically that you have access to the device's hardware. So in this case, because we're taking a picture, normally when you use HTML5 and you take a picture, you have a custom dialog that appears depending on whether you're on iOS or on Android, asking you, do I want to take a picture? Do I want to use one from the camera roll? Do I want to get one from iCloud? Do I want to get it from some other place? Do I want to use clip art? We don't want any of that. We want to make our application as simple as possible. So with the Phonegap method, it just pops right into the camera. The Phonegap is also used when using QR codes and doing QR scanning. You need Phonegap for that. And while you don't need Phonegap to do GPS, if you do use Phonegap to use GPS, it's a little bit of a smoother experience, and it doesn't keep constantly bugging your user to ask whether or not it's okay if it uses its current location or doesn't use the current location. So there are a few other advantages as well. That you can store a lot more pictures because you can put them into not just the local working memory, but also into the file system of the device. And there's quite a few things as well. I'm actually going to get to Phonegap if I have time towards the end of this presentation and show you basically how you get documentation and set that up on your own system. So that is it for camera capture. And let's take a look and see what other controls we have that might need some explaining. Signature capture, that's the last one right there. So at the end of the, when you're finished basically taking in all this stuff, the inspector signs their name and they click Submit Inspection, and that saves the record along with the date and time that it was submitted, along with their signature. And we use that signature capture control to do that. So let's pop over to Alpha Anywhere and show you how we did that. So that's up here. It's in one of the panel cards. It's the signature panel card. Oops, a little further. Here it is. And this is on panel, looks like panel card number 6. On pedal card number 6, we have a piece of text basically saying I certified that the observations and statements are true, or whatever disclaimer you want to put above it. Then I've included a signature capture control, which I dragged over here from our list of data controls, and a button which submits the inspection when it's done. Now there is some control that you have over the signature capture control. You can decide on the size, how big the signature area is compared to how big the container area is. In other words, how big is the space that you're allowed to write in. What color the background should be. I've chosen a gray color. That seems to be pretty common, but you could choose any other color that you want to. And that is about the extent of it. There are quite a few options for signature capture, not quite as many as there are for ink control. But they're worth looking into if you want to modify beyond what the default behavior is from Alpha Anywhere. So I believe that covers it for the various controls, and I've showed you where the device is in. So let me go take a look through my checklist to make sure that we went through everything. So we talked about panel cards, panel navigators, and panel headers, and that's sort of how you arrange the controls in your application and allow the user to navigate from place to place using the panel navigators. I've shown you the list control, which is where the data is saved. It's up here at the top. And it's the thing that gives you the offline capabilities, the ability to do the automatic synchronization in the back end. That's all done with a list control. We talked a little bit about the client-side data cache, and that is like a list control, except you don't actually see the controls. It's all hidden information that your scripts can get to. And we use that client-side data cache in this case to keep track of all the information about the different pieces of equipment. For example, we knew that if you scanned something and it had QR code which said CMT001, that meant it was for the cement truck 001. And then we also knew information about the make, the model, and the picture that we wanted to display for that. So that was in the client-side data cache. We went over sort of the buttons, the pass-fail buttons, and the numeric buttons. We covered the notion of windows, how there are pop-ups that appear over the cards. I showed you how the camera works, how we hooked up GPS using Action JavaScript, and how we mapped our latitude and longitude fields from that Action JavaScript action to the fields that we had created. We went over the image capture, and we went over the signature capture control. So there are two last things that I would like to cover before we call it quits. The first is under the Phonegap part that I was talking about, and then what I'll get to is how you actually download this application and install it yourself. But let's first talk about Phonegap. Now, if you recall, I had mentioned there are two ways to deploy an application. You can deploy it as an HTML5 application, where you just give your users a URL that they go to run the application. Or you can deploy it as a Phonegap application, where they actually install it like a real application, and it works offline and gives them access to the device hardware. So this was meant to be used for Phonegap, and if you click on the Phonegap button here, you'll see these are the Phonegap Build project settings. Now, we intended for this to work under both Android and iOS, so I'm going to click on Android and I'm going to click on iOS right here. And there's some information here. There's a username and password, and that's because to use Phonegap Build, you do need to get an account from Adobe, which you can get at Phonegap. I believe it's just phonegapbuild.com, but just do a quick Google to find it. You can also just go into the documentation for the Phonegap Build. This is Open Alpha Anywhere Phonegap Build documentation. If you click on it, it'll open a browser with that information. Phonegap Build, if you're just doing one application, it is free of charge. If you're doing more than that, there is a annual fee. I don't think it's that high. I think it's under $100. Probably worth it if you're building out mobile applications. And then underneath here, there are a bunch of plugins that you can include, and these are the things that let you have access to the device's hardware. And we include a lot of them. They're sort of on by default. For example, if you want to have access to the camera, you need the camera plugin, but we've included that for you. If you want to have access to GPS, there is a GPS here, and enable geolocation features right there. That one has been clicked. There is one for a QR code, which is somewhere, which I'm not going to go look for now, but it's here in this list. And those are all turned on in the project. So when you do publish this yourself, make sure you switch on the types of platforms you want it to work on, Android or iOS, and get your own username and password. And do take a look at the Phonegap documentation so that you can see how to actually get the application you build onto your phone. So that is that for Phonegap. The last thing I want to cover is how to get and install the application yourself. And we do that in Github. So you may be familiar with GitHub, you may not. GitHub is a big repository where you can store basically software that you want other people to have access to the source files. We have our own GitHub. It's called github.com/alphaanywhere. And when you go there, what I suggest you do first is click the Repositories tab up at the top. And then to find this particular application that we're talking about today, just type in the letters INS or INSP, and it will find Inspection Solutions from the list of repositories in our Alpha Anywhere GitHub account. Now, clicking on this will take you to a page which has got a green button on it which says Clone or Download, and that just click on that and it'll take a zip file and it will download all of the in that zip all of the files that you need to open and use this application. And let me show you. And once that is done, and at the bottom of that file, actually, let me just open up our GitHub in that. So let's go to github.com/Alpha Anywhere Inspection Solutions. We actually give you directions at the very bottom for how to download and install this project. And we also have a link here for how to download and install any sample app, and that's here in our documentation system. If you're not familiar with our documentation system, extremely useful. You can go to documentation.alphasoftware.com or alphasoftware.com/documentation. Either one will take you there. It has a search feature, and so this brought up the search here for how to do a GitHub repository. If you have any questions about the documentation on any one of the pages, we strongly encourage you to click the report an issue with this page. If you say, I just don't get something, click on it. Type it in. We actually have people who are monitoring that. They could say, oh, take a look at this section, or wow, that wasn't clear. Let's add some more to the documentation. So we are actually very responsive to people who click on that link. Besides that link, we also have, here's the documentation for Phonegap. Let me go ahead. I can just paste that into the chat window if you're interested. Link. Paste. And again, you can also launch that right from within the software. There was a hyperlink when you opened up the Phonegap tab. So that about covers it. I have a couple minutes for questions if anyone wants to ask a question. If you can't think of your question now, that's completely okay. I always seem to remember just after I get my opportunity, but don't worry. You can always send your questions to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com, and we're happy to get them answered for you. So if you do have a question, I'll give you a minute or so to type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. And if not, we'll consider this to be done. So you're going to find a copy of today's session, which has been recorded, at videos.alphasoftware.com. It should be posted within a day or two. We'll also include a link to this PowerPoint, which has got the links in it to the various documentation pieces, as well as the screenshots that I showed off here today. So that looks like it. I want to thank you very much for attending, and I hope to see you at a future webinar. Take care and goodbye.